Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about how to develop a new relationship with resilience. And these skills will both support you, your staff, and the students that you serve. So our agenda is that we'll talk about what resilience is and what it isn't, challenges that our students are facing these days, our recent results from Brooklyn's Medgar Evers College, how purpose boosts resilience, and resilience tools that you can immediately benefit from. So I would absolutely love it if you have a robust conversation in the chat space. There's a lot of smart people in the room here who can enrich this conversation. Here's how to access the chat space. You'll see this lower left, and enter any questions or comments you have here as they occur to you. For the moment, everyone is muted, but we'll change that towards the end of the presentation when we'll also have a chance for Q&A. First, an introduction. My name is Garrison-Brook, and I am the founder of Discovering My Purpose. We're a charitable organization, and our focus is serving both college students and at-risk youth to help them lead happier, more meaningful lives. So to get started, let's do this. I invite you to close your eyes. Breathe into the belly and think of resilience. Before we talk about what resilience means, here's a question for you. When you think of resilience, how do you feel? Breathe into that awareness. Again, thinking of resilience, how do you feel? What rises up inside of you? Another breath. And now open your eyes. And I would love to hear what emotions came up for you. And please don't filter your responses. I want to hear your honest reaction to what resilience means. Here are some ones that I've heard or experienced. When you think about resilience, you might feel pressured, you might feel guilty, you might feel bad, you might feel angry, you might feel exhausted, you might feel like you're falling short. For such a positive word, it sure has a lot of baggage. Just this morning, I was on Facebook and I saw an ad for this bracelet, and it made me wonder, is this part of our struggle with resilience? It makes us feel like we are not enough. And for those who experience positive emotions with resilience, your voice is really important here too, especially letting us know what fuels your resilience, since it sounds like you've already have some of this stuff figured out. We would love to learn from you. So I read a story recently that talked about colleges that were coaching students in the spring semester in resilience tools. And this was the students' response. And I've got some thoughts on why. So I think it's a fair assumption that these students were already feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And if their perception was the tools being provided were about toughing it out or bouncing back, that's probably not going to play well. If you all had some programs on resilience last semester, we would love to hear from you on what your experience was and the feedback you got from students. Please share in the chat. So let's talk more about these struggles. As human beings, in an effort to understand something, we try to observe it, right? That's natural. And when we do this, we can be led to believe that resilience lies in the things we do, because that's what we can see, what we can observe. We might come to believe that resilience means we keep juggling those balls, we keep getting stuff done, we keep going. The common definition involves something along the lines of resilience is bouncing back quickly and easily, maybe with a smile on your face. And that's just not realistic. We are real people, not plastic bouncy balls. Resilience is not always juggling to keep all of the balls in the air. And resilience is not bouncing back quickly and easily. So when resilience feels like an enormous should, this is what we get, right? Feels like the world is on our shoulders. So some of us, in that meditation, the quick meditation we did, some of us had some pretty negative feelings about resilience. And for those of you who didn't, again, that's brilliant, and we're glad you're here too. But for many of us, the perceived message is that we need to keep going. And to be really resilient, we need to make it look easy. As part of this presentation, I was looking up pictures for resilience, and these are some of the ones that I found. This just further proves my point. I found one like this and like this, okay? No, this is not resilience. So many of us confuse perseverance with resilience, and they are not the same. A lot of us are tired, aren't we? So being told to suck it up, bounce back, and keep going, it doesn't feel so great. So that's where this reaction can come from. So let's shift. We've talked about what resilience isn't. Let's talk about what resilience is. True resilience is an inside job. It's about responding authentically in a way that respects your own needs and emotions. Here's a definition of resilience more grounded in reality. The American Psychological Association says, resilience is about adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, threats, tragedy, or even significant sources of stress. Adapting well, not necessarily adapting easily. So, what does adapting well look like to you? I love the picture of this chameleon. He's not blending in at all, is he? He's rocking his authentic colors for all the world to see. We need to be more like this chameleon. We each need to recognize that our adapting well might look very different for you than it does for me. And maybe your adapting well is even more awesome and it looks like this. At the heart of it, we need to give ourselves permission to figure out what our own version of resilience looks like so that we are living from a place of authenticity that feeds and fuels us. And we need to help our students figure this out as well. Toward the end of our time together, I will share some powerful tools and mindsets that will help. Plus, I've got a bonus for you. So let's shift gears again a little bit and talk about how purpose is tied to resilience. In the last session of the day, we'll dig into how purpose improves academic engagement and student retention. But for now, let's highlight stuff tied to resilience, since that's what this talk is about. There have been dozens and dozens of amazing studies on the power of purpose. So how is a purposeful life better? People are happier, healthier, less anxious and depressed, have less substance abuse problems, they're more successful, and they're more fulfilled. Purpose has even more benefits than the ones you see here, but these are some of the really awesome ones. So how do resilience and purpose tie together? Here's wisdom from Stanford professor Bill Damon, who says, purpose endows a person with joy in good times and resilience in hard times. And this holds true all throughout life. So this holds true for you, it holds true for your staff, and it holds true for your students. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about why knowing what your purpose is, why it boosts resilience. So at the heart of it, it's rooted in intrinsic motivation, which you probably know that that's when your motivation to do something comes from inside of yourself. And when it comes to staying fueled up, we respond to extrinsic and intrinsic motivation very differently. Extrinsic motivation, that's the stuff like getting good grades, getting paid for the work that you do. And it can run you down, especially when you keep getting the same praise over and over again. With that same praise, you build up a tolerance to it, and it doesn't provide the same level of motivation, right? You probably know this if you're doing a job at a certain point in your life, you've done a job which you haven't enjoyed. That paycheck comes in and it's kind of like, yeah, whatever, I got paid. I still don't like my job, right? So when you're fueled by extrinsic motivation, there's often a need for more self-discipline, since you might not want to do what you need to do, and this can be tiring. So intrinsic motivation is the equivalent of plugging into the Force. I've got a Star Wars fan here, so it's very natural for me to use Star Wars analogies. As long as you love doing something, you keep wanting to do it. And the energy comes from inside of you. And we'll talk more about this in my next session, which is all about academic engagement. But for now, let's just say that intrinsic motivation fuels resilience. What mark do you want to make on the world? This is a powerful question, and yet only around 20% of students have an answer. This leaves the rest of the students adrift, which makes them less likely to be resilient. When we figure out who we are and what we're here to do, it is so grounding for us emotionally. For our youth, this means that they're more likely to do better in school and they're more likely to thrive. So far we've been talking about some generic things, some generic challenges, and let's get more specific. I have an example for you. In early 2019, I was very lucky to make the acquaintance of Dr. Joanne Roll, who serves as Dean of the Business School at Medgar Evers College, which is a CUNY school in Brooklyn, New York. Dean Roll reached out to me because she was witnessing the challenges her students were facing, and she was searching for a solution. So let me tell you more about those challenges. So my source here is the National Center for Education Statistics, and according to them, at Medgar Evers, only 58% of students who started in 2017 returned in 2018. That's the latest stats that they have on their site. And even more alarming, 14% of students who started their studies in 2012 graduated with their 4-year degree within a 6-year window. Okay, 14%. And these were things that Dean Roll felt were critical to address. So as I mentioned earlier, Discovering My Purpose is a nonprofit organization, and we're focused on helping youth live happier, more meaningful lives. And one of the ways we do this is to provide our program, which is called In Pursuit of Purpose, to college students. To work specifically with Medgar Evers, we took this signature program of ours and we rebranded it into Success and Resilience, because that's what we felt, one, would really speak to the students who were receiving it, and two, it felt like that's what we really, really needed for them to ingest. And by and large, this was the exact same program with one critical difference. Throughout the program, we interspersed video interviews with Medgar Evers alumni, and they're pictured here. So I'm sure you've witnessed this phenomenon. I've definitely witnessed it. A new student arrives at your school, and the imposter syndrome flares up. They start questioning themselves, asking, do I really belong here? Do I have what it takes? Everyone else seems to have it together, but I know that I do not. So studies have shown that when an upperclassman talks to first-year students and shares their real story, which includes how they also struggled, the doubts they had about themselves, maybe their poor grades, and how they're now doing better, this boosts the belief of those freshmen that they can do the same. It normalizes their experience, right? So in these videos, we ask each student a few questions. We ask them, did you struggle? Everyone says yes. We also ask them, did you ever think of quitting school? Again, everyone says yes. And then we ask them to share the tools they use to succeed in school. And we ask them to share how their degree had made a difference in their career and life success. So when you look at what's working and explore how you can expand those practices out to others, you're leveraging the power of appreciative inquiry. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. For those of you who were in an earlier session with Dr. Robeson, you might remember her talking about the stress response and the challenge response. So the nutshell is that with the stress response, there's a sense of, I don't have the resources or skills to do this. And with the challenge response, the general sense is, this might be hard, but I got this. So as I was thinking about that, it helped me realize that these conversations, however they're structured, whether it's a video interview like we did with Medgar Evers, or an in-person gathering once we're through this craziness, however it's structured, these conversations can be a powerful bridge between stress response and challenge response, between students thinking, I don't think I can, to they overcame their struggles. If they can do it, I can do it too. And this ties right into student resilience, right? Helping these students adapt well to adversity and stress. So Dean Roll shared, in my opinion, there are two critical elements that support student retention and persistence to graduation. There are students' understanding of why they're in school, i.e., how education supports the pursuit of their life purpose, and a strong dose of resilience. In Pursuit of Purpose is tailor-made to help with both of those things. In my next session, I'll talk more about how a student's connection to their why boosts retention, and we'll dig more into the specifics of how that program at Medgar was structured in my next session. In this session, we'll just touch lightly upon the results. The program took place in spring in Brooklyn, New York. And our program always includes a pre- and post-program emotional baseline assessment. As you see here, we partnered with Medgar Evers Professor Ayana Kone, and the In Pursuit of Purpose, which we rebranded to that Success and Resilience program, we embedded that, it's an online class, we embedded that into an organizational class of 23 students. So again, we have that pre and post emotional baseline assessment, and it was done in the spring. So think about that timing. We measured students' emotional baselines, anger, anxiety, etc., in January of 2020. That was pre-COVID. And then to show the impact of the class, we want to see that their emotional outlooks have improved. So students took the post-program measurements in late March and early April, right in the thick of this was going on. The new cases in New York City are shown here in orange, and in the yellow stuff are new tests. So you can see that the class was wrapping up during the peak of COVID. And as I was waiting for the results to come in, I was thinking, this is going to be a bloodbath. So I was feeling, honestly, like this. I was pretty scared and braced for the worst. And then the results came in and we were like this. And as an aside, I will admit that I've had students make fun of me saying, you know, you use a lot of cat memes in your classes, right? So my personal opinion is if they're laughing while they're learning, that's good in my book. And if they're laughing at me a little bit, I'm all right with that. So again, students took pre and post-program emotional baseline surveys. And these were classical psychological assessments. These were not questions that I just threw together. I used really classical assessments such as the Patient Health Questionnaire 9, the PHQ 9 for depression, the GAD 7 for anxiety, and we went through and we measured these things: anger, anxiety, depression, grit, life satisfaction, self-esteem, and more. Those are the big ones. And here are the results. Everything in green means that it moved in the direction we wanted it to move. So anger, down 4%, anxiety, down 30%, depression, up 6%. They're locked in their apartments. It's kind of sad. We get it. They're more depressed. Grit went up a little bit, about 3%. Life satisfaction went up a nice bump, 11%. And self-esteem went up just a little bit over 1%. So anxiety, obviously, in particular, is amazing. It went down 30%. And this was in the middle of COVID in a hard-hit area in Brooklyn, New York. So Professor Kone observed, she said, during this semester, I noticed a marked difference between the students who had experienced In Pursuit of Purpose compared to my students who had not. These students had an air of hope and positivity. They were also more focused on self-care, which is an important part of resilience. All right, so that's the highlight of Medgar Evers. Really exciting, right? If you want to hear more about the class, you can certainly ask questions in our Q&A, but I also am going to dig deeper into it in our next session. So revisiting our plans for this time together. We have talked about what resilience is and what it isn't, the challenges our students are struggling with, how purpose boosts resilience, and our recent success with Medgar Evers. The last part of our class are the resilience tools that you and your students can immediately benefit from. Quick reminder, the definition of resilience, it's about adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, threats, tragedy, or even significant sources of stress. If there's one thing that I would love for you to take away from our time together, it is that resilience is not about doing. Resilience is a state of being. That's what I meant when I said that it's an inside job. Only you can determine what adapting well looks like for you. But with that said, I'm still going to provide you with some ideas. And here's where the rubber meets the road, right? What does adapting well mean to you? And how can you leverage these tools to help serve yourself, your staff, and your students? So here are some ideas. When I think of resilience, I often picture us all as surfers. Resilience is about learning how to ride the waves of life. Now, I got to tell you, I took exactly one surf lesson and I was a hot mess. It's a skill, right? Just like surfing, resilience is a skill and we learn it with time. So this is a perfect thing to lead with. This is the lovely Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, a Harvard-trained positive psychologist whom I've had a chance to study with, and that's actually, our program is based largely on his work, which we're so grateful for his support. And as we studied with him, Tall often counseled us that we need to give ourselves permission to be human. In light of this, we need to remember that resilience might look like 2 steps forward and 1 step back during these times of challenge. And that's okay. Day by day, moment by moment, we show up and we do our best. Every morning is a chance to begin again. So here's the great news. As we develop these resilience skills, it might still not be easy, but in time it will get easier. So this is our resilience starter kit. We're going to provide you with 6 steps to boost your resilience and the resilience of your students. And again, adapting well is unique to each of us, so some of these might resonate more than others. And then at the end, we're also going to have a bonus for you. So we're going to talk about expectations, how to appreciate the good, student inspiration, self-care, the emotional barometer, shed, and then we're going to have a bonus. Shed and self-care should kind of be together. Sorry, made a mistake there. So from an expectation standpoint, we need to examine our shoulds and see if they're serving us. In this time and place, are they realistic? When there's something on our plate to do, and again, we feel like this, we need to stop and check in. We need to ask ourselves, is this truly mission critical? Or could it be done differently? Could it be done by someone else? Or could we stop doing it? As we let go, we can come to recognize that adapting well might mean doing less. Remember, give yourself permission to be human. So now, when we talk about giving our students permission to loosen expectations on themselves, you might feel like this. Oh, the slippery slope that could become. I respect that you live in the real world and you have a responsibility to educate these students. So with some creativity, maybe there are things that could provide them with some breathing room that you feel comfortable with. So here's another great tall quote. When you appreciate the good appreciates. And I happen to have proof that this is true. So as I mentioned in my brief introduction, as part of our charitable focus, we teach our program to at-risk youth. And this picture is of 2 of our foster girls that I taught recently. After the program was over, and I was looking over their results, that same pre- and post-program assessment that we talked about with Medgar Evers, one thing in particular really jumped out at me. Over the course of the 6 weeks we spent together, their life satisfaction score nearly doubled. Why? That's what I was obviously asking myself, why? And I'll tell you that at the beginning of every class, I asked them a simple question. What was the best part of your week? The first time I asked them that, I just walked in to the group foster home, and I was still setting up my computer and my projector. I was kind of filling time. And when I asked that question, they looked at me like I had 2 heads, and no one had an answer for me. These were girls who had experienced extreme trauma. They were always on the lookout for the next threat. But class by class, I coached them. As I finished up class, I would say, remember to keep an eye out for your best thing, because I'm going to ask you about it next week. It can be something small, a great dessert, a new song, a funny joke. And what I saw was every week it got easier for them to share. And you can see the impact that it had on them. Life satisfaction up 92%. That's pretty amazing. So previous to our class, in their focus on survival, my girls were always looking at what was broken. or what was missing. And there's a good chance that right now, with everything that we have going on, we're doing the same thing. But the power of appreciative inquiry, when we focus on what we have, what is right, what is good, amazing things can happen. So keep that in mind as you're talking to your students. See about ways that you can ask them for what's going well, what's working well. As Tal says, again, when you appreciate the good appreciates. So here are some ideas on how to leverage appreciative inquiry for yourself. For you to use in your family, you can change this question to, what was the best part of our day? Maybe add this in as part of your dinner or your drive home. Or if you're doing this on your own, it's really sweet to journal about this right before bed. And as you do this, watch for themes. Is there something that consistently lights you up? Pay attention to this, because I'm going to tell you why in a minute. So, how do you leverage appreciative inquiry for students? I'd love to hear from you what the key challenges are that you feel like you need to address at your school. Add these into the chat space. But from what I've heard, I think it's a fair guess to assume that it's dealing with student anger, anxiety, and stress. And also dealing with anger, anxiety, and stress for your staff, right? And your teachers. So ask staff to be on the lookout for what's working well. Or maybe students who seem to be coping with these challenges well. And then from there, harvest what you find. Look for things to learn from. And based on what these results look like, based on what you find, maybe you ask students to share their stories with others, if that's appropriate, if you think they'd be comfortable. Or you, with their permission, you can share their best practices on their behalf with other students. Or you could also bring students together in like a Zoom gathering to brainstorm out solutions that work for staying well and being successful. So self-care is always important, but it's even more important right now. We need to drink as much as we pour. Taking care of ourselves is at the heart of resilience. So what does self-care look like for you? Earlier, I invited you to keep an eye on any themes you might notice from the best parts of your day. Remember? So as you notice those themes, try to mindfully do more of that. What are some of your favorite self-care habits? Feel free to share them in the chat space. I'd love to see them. One of mine, personally, is laying in the hammock in the backyard reading with my 9-year-old. So a question for you. We're still focused on self-care, but how often have you seen this and this? Probably more times than you could count, right? If you're in the classroom. Please help me understand why it's so cool to be tired, because I honestly don't get it, but I know that it's a thing. Often when we think about self-care, we think of treating ourselves. We think of getting an ice cream or taking a hot bath or getting a massage, pre-COVID days. Oh gosh, I can't wait to get a massage again. But the most powerful foundation of self-care can be summarized in 4 words, which make up the SHED acronym. Based on the last slide, you can probably guess that S stands for sleep. Okay? H is for hydration, E is for exercise, and D is for diet. All of these are important, but if I had to crown one as the king, it would be sleep. Dr. Robson mentioned how important sleep is in her presentation, and I have to say I concur. So Dr. Robson used a description that I really loved. She talked about how while we sleep, our brains move what we learn from short-term memory into long-term memory. And this is obviously a critical part of the learning process. So when we only get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, that's the equivalent of pulling the plug on the computer when it's in the middle of a download. I'm going to share a handout with you at the end of the session that includes a variety of resilience suggestions, including sleep. That's the bonus I've been talking about. So make sure you encourage your students to get sleep. Here's another and the last tool for you to utilize. This is a mindfulness practice from a Buddhist teacher named Pema Chodron. And she says, it's not life that causes suffering. It's our interpretation that causes so much distress. So to help with that, rather than identifying with your emotions by saying, I am happy or I am sad, what about just naming them? And what I mean by that, you say, there is happiness, there is anger, there is excitement, there is grief. And like clouds in the sky, we realize that these emotions will come and go. This is a time of tremendous upheaval. It's natural and normal to experience strong feelings as a result. But just like the weather, emotions ebb and flow. Let them flow through you while always turning toward the good, what fuels your gratitude and joy. So let's wrap up our time together with the meditation. I invite you again to close your eyes and breathe into the belly. Allow your mind to settle. While we're in this quiet place, I invite you again to think about resilience. Think about adapting well to the challenges that are facing you right now. Your personal resilience is so important. You need this in order to continue serving others. Breathe into the belly and see how you feel. Have your feelings around resilience shifted? Maybe it isn't a dramatic change. Maybe it feels like things are unknotting a little, or you're feeling more open and hopeful about ways you can embrace more resilience in your life. As you're ready, open your eyes and recognize that even if you took a small step, a kitty cat-sized step towards resilience, you have made a shift. And that is powerful. Please share in the chat space what your feelings towards resilience are now. So wrapping up, again, resilience isn't about doing more things. It's a state of being where you have adapted well to the adversity and stress you're facing. How we get to this place of adapting well is different from person to person. Intrinsic motivation boosts resilience. Resilience means we've shifted from the threat response of, I don't know if I can do this, to the challenge response of, I have the resources I need to cope with this challenge. So our resilience boosters are that we check in with our expectations. We give ourselves permission to be human. We make a habit of practicing self-care, sleep being most important. Let emotions flow through you and personally look for what's working well and bring more of that into your life. Professionally, Watch for students and staff who are adapting well and ask them to share their habits. So in the chat space, here's the bonus. This is a flyer that you can give to students to help them better understand and boost their resilience. So it's 10 things on how to boost resilience. In discovering my purpose, we believe that this is one of life's most important questions. What on earth am I here for? And often, college is the place that people try to discover this. So thank you so much for the role you play in helping students live more purposeful lives. If you'd like to help youth dig deeper, your students dig deeper, we're here for you with our free online program for college students. Join me at 4 p.m. to learn more about how students understanding their why boosts academic engagement and resilience. If you'd like to reach out to me, I would love to hear from you. I know that we've covered a lot of ground, and I would love to take time to answer your questions now.